Okay, I'm going to build this one from scratch and show you how you can use gate logic to build something fairly interesting. Grab that object and put it in invisible, pop us back onto shaded, and see where we can start. We're going to take the script, which is here. It's going to generate all this information, and we will save the document as, I believe, B, and that should allow us to get busy with it. So let's scratch everything, and as long as we have our bifocal tool, sometimes it resets, so you always have to kind of go in and enable it. What I'm going to do is build once again, a delicious point system. If you don't know that by now, that's really what I like to do. And I'm going to grab a range. This is going to be fairly simple. I'm going to put that into my X coordinate, and then I'm actually going to use a graph mapper, and I'm going to use the sine curve because I like it. Probably going to set up the sine curve, maybe reading as like that. I'm just going off my other model, bring it in here, but I'm actually going to put a multiplication in here. You can do it within here by double-clicking, left-click, and changing these numbers within this domain, but I like to have a little bit of control outside of it, so I'm going to put that into here, funnel that into Z because I want it to go up. And my domain and range, I'm going to change a little bit. My domain's going to run up to, actually I'm going to create a domain because I want to have a little more control over that as well. I wasn't going to start it from 0, but if I do, we'll take it up to 3.0. So I've got an ability to jump up there. My step count's going to go up. I usually type 12 to get a step count up to 100. And L is here to tell me what's going on. And step count's fine. I'm going to take my multiplication factor up by 2.00, which will give me a rational number between 0 and 10. And now we're going to jump into here and have our curve. It's going to inform what we do, and you'll see what I end up doing with it in a minute. I think my numbers are set pretty well. What I first of all do is I deconstruct those points because I want to have access to those. I want to do things with there. I want to actually get in a little bit of logic based on numbers. So I'll pull that out here, and what I will do to visualize, and I always do this on the curve, is interpolate these points so I can at least have a look at those. And that interpolated data, I will grab a start and finish to that. And then what I can do is just generate a line between it. So I've got a line that I can move up and down. And you can see that line is actually can be manipulated. And I will divide those curves. It's getting a little jumbly. Divide those curve. So now I have access to a count and kinks on there. And I can deconstruct those points as well. And if I deconstruct those points, I can get at the Z as well. So I've got data coming out and points on the Z. And now I have some logic, and I can start thinking things. So if I go into my sets and go into my tool logic, I think it's in maths. I don't use it so often. Operators. Let's go into larger than, and let's go into smaller than. And let's think about grabbing that. So if we grab our first data out of these points as first number in and first number in, and this being the numbers out, I could start to see a pattern here, and you can see there's false, false, false all the way through, false, false, false. This one's true, false. This one is true, false. So you've got some data that's coming out. So what I can do is take this and say, well, let's rebuild some points from it. So I'm going to go back to my vector and say, let's assemble those points again. And I'm just going to take my x and y's because I'm going to want those, but it's the z that I want to play with. And I'm going to amplify a called pattern. So going into stats, calling out a pattern, I'm going to take that data as a pattern. I am going to take my list as my z's. And I now am able to decide is that the call pattern is going to be a multiplier, which is nice, into the z-axis. So if it comes up with no information, it'll multiply by 0 and it'll get rid of it, which is actually pretty cool to think about. And I don't usually think that way. And it was something I just discovered and playful. So if I take my Z component and multiply it by the called pattern, I then can actually put in some points that do some strange or different things. So that being here, let me go down here and choose those curves. So we've actually made a curve that's flattened. You're going to get some really strange control over these types of things. Let me grab again an interpolated curve, And you can see that I've got another curve that's kind of influenced. It does the janky thing at the beginning, which I actually really like. And it's usually those things I look for when I'm scripting. And I don't want to eradicate them. I'm not so engineered and architectural in a sense that maybe they don't do that. But I actually, I find those things actually very thrilling. So I'm going to grab this again, and I'm going to take my called pattern here, and I'm going to have another list. So I have this data, and I have this data. And I think that's set right. If I look at it, my called pattern here is having a little trouble, so I must have pulled my list out. Why am I having trouble with data coming through here? Smaller than, larger than. Let me just take a look. My Z component is coming through as my list. And there's some problem with this that it is definitely shouldn't be having trouble, but I am having it. Could be that I set this in a way that, yeah, it is. It does have an influence on that. You have to watch where your curves are. Otherwise, you end up having some problems. So you have your graph mapper that can fudge this in and out. But I've got a really nice set of two curves here. And in looking at that, I know I can start doing some magic to that. So we're sitting at 6 minutes, and we should be fine on this script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those curves, and I'm going to do things with them. I'm first of all going to take those curves and put them into a subcurve. So let's go into curves, spline, subcurve, because I want to be able to slip it on my wrist. So let's take those two, and let's take a little domain out of here, subcurve, and let's set the top part of the domain to 0.9. So it's, and in doing so, I'm going to have to reparameterize my base curves. And if I pop that in, you'll see I get a curve that actually just got a little shorter than here and here. So this curve is brought back to, these curves are brought back to this curve. And if you didn't notice that, you'll see those that get extended. So that's just a little bit of ability to slip it around my wrist. At this point, I will probably pipe these, and I don't have to do a variable pipe. That's really going to slow down the script. I'll take a little pipe on those curves. I'm going to turn the radius into something really tiny. I'm going to go 0.1, and then I'm going to go into here, edit slider, take it up to 2 decimal places, and bring that 0.1, the highest note, and bring that right down to something manageable as a radius. You see, you start getting this radius that's actually manageable. And it could be articulated more as points, but you get this funky kind of flat pattern and weird wavy stuff. And once again, that's the funk that I like while I script. I like to provide things a little differently. Another thing I'm going to do is take these two curves. I'm going to do something interesting that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So grab your surface from curves, and sometimes these will close up and sometimes they won't run. And right now it's running. That's very nice. Look at that pattern that happens and I get that solid. Sometimes you don't get that, that surface, but that's something I want to play with as well. And then I want to extrude that surface. I've got to look at my other script because now I'm mentally getting, I challenge myself a little too much. Let's take that surface as a direction, and we'll move that in the Y and axis, and then I will make a slider to it. I'm just going to set up 2.00 as a slider, but the slider itself I'm going to go into and edit, and I want to be able to take that up to 3, down to 1, make that negative, and take that down to 3 in the negative. So now I can actually play off of positive and negative. Let's set it to very low. Actually, that's, yeah, I think negative 0.2 is all right. It won't be too much. We'll go to negative 2. And you can see the extrusion in what I'm getting there. And now that's still got a flow. And that might actually be too thick, so I'm not sure if I like that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to generate something to flow to. So I have these pipes. I have this surface. That's been generated. Two together are actually pretty nice. I could do it on both sides, but I'm actually just going to leave it on that side. Watching my minutes at 8 minutes. And now I'm going to generate something as a solid cylinder. Cylinder set at 5.9 as a radius is going to generate a pretty nice surface that I can debrep. I can find a list item. I do this quite a bit if you're not familiar with this. Edges, and actually, let's go back here and put the edge items into there. Yes, edge items into there, just taking a look. Let it default to that edge, and that will be the, once I get into the flow object, you'll see what I'm basically making. Flow is something that's going to require a target, and the target will be that line. The base will be the pipe that's coming from, let me just follow this, the base geometry. Okay, well, we can plug our geometries in now. We definitely want this in here, but let's think about our baseline, which is going to go back to this strange axis, which I showed you earlier. This axis that I actually have control going up and down on this curve. I can move that up and down. So that's my axis of where I want to run that script, that base. And then I want to pull my geometry in that extrusion. And I want to pull this extrusion in here. And with any luck, with a few seconds, maybe 3, hopefully, if I haven't messed up anything, 5 seconds. So it's a longer script. You can see what I ended up having. And I've got a big extrusion there that's a little too excessive in the minus. So what I'll do is I'll go in here and I'll edit within here, make it very small, and that should jump out a little bit from that surface. And I've got a very interesting, give it 5 seconds of load. And are we lucky? Let's just take a little bit of time. You can see we made something with a nice little surface. Hard to see what it is with everything else on. Let's generate all this take it off, take the whole thing and say Juicy Gate tutorial group, and say I've made a very interesting script which I throw out to the world to do whatever the heck you want to do with it. So very nice little piece of jewelry. Grab the bake, and what's nice is when you bake it and don't group it, you can actually go in after it takes 5 seconds to bake. We can leave this script, take that off, and we can actually go into the let's say artistic. Oh, technical is going to take a little time as well. You always forget that technical or artistic or pen always takes a little bit of time to think about what it wants to do. There we go. Now you can go in, you can select edit. Well, you can select the surface, which is nice, and that'll grab everything around it. Or you can select edit that surface. That's not what I want. I want this surface. Nope. I want, oh, it's a little tricky because it's so thin. Let me grab my render and maybe that'll allow me to see it a little better. Select edit that section, right, that section, and around here, that section and that section. Those are all the raised surfaces. And let's throw that into a lovely zebra. Why not? And oh, and now it wants to analyze my object again. So I have to select edit, select edit, select edit, and select edit, and hit enter. And if we put that into a dark green, that's a zebra pattern. And then if I grab the outside edge and say, let's put that one into an EMAP, that'll be a fun one. That should be fine. Just takes a second on those curves because there's a lot of ISO curves on there. And that should be it. You've got a pretty cool thing. EMAP and green. And maybe this green doesn't have to be green. We can take it to a red, bring it into a bright, and there you go. You got a pretty cool, awesome ring to play with. So 12-minute video on a tutorial of generating some very cool jewelry. I'm very excited about the script. I'm going to share it with our jewelers, and we're going to try and cluster it, I hope, if they like it. And you will have the power to make some really cool design. And I'm starting to think I'm actually designing jewelry, which is a new thing this morning. So hopefully with the support and encouragement I've received online and internationally, I can keep going with this computational design program development that I'm so interested in doing. That's based on very simple maths. Once you have the algorithm, the possibilities are endless. There's no beginning, there's no end. And seems to me, if I can just add this at the end, it's not about me understanding these algorithms so then I can interpret them. It is about, and I think the future is about, writing algorithms that can be programmed, that actually can run themselves through their own machine learning and their own AI. And that's where I think I'm going. It's slow steps and snail baby steps in getting to that process, but you have to get your mind in that direction before you can do anything else. So the sense of this being generated by AI or robotics is what thrills me, and the purpose being ornamental or jewelry seems beautiful, to put something in AI's mind to make something of beauty that has a purposelessness in a sense of emotional and compassionate and giving. So anyhow, I'm ranting, but that's really the philosophy behind all this stuff. The math behind it is just basically some simple gate logic. I mean, it could be very easy. Is the first number bigger or smaller than the other number? So yeah, don't let me ramble too much. Turn me off when I get doing that, and go on to the next script. Thanks for watching.